The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead at Mel's Diner on Route 66, casting harsh shadows across the cracked vinyl booths. Sarah Martinez wiped down the same table for the third time, her worn sneakers squeaking against the checkered linoleum floor. At 28, she had been working double shifts for 2 years, her nursing school dreams gathering dust like the fake flowers on each table. "Order up!" barked Frank, the perpetually grumpy cook, slamming a plate of burnt hash browns onto the pass. Sarah rushed over, but as she reached for the plate, her tired hands slipped. The ceramic crashed to the floor, hash browns scattering like confetti across her already stained apron. "That's coming out of your tips, Martinez." Frank's voice boomed across the nearly empty diner. "Third plate this week. Maybe you should find a job that doesn't require coordination." The few customers looked up from their meals, some snickering. Sarah's cheeks burned with embarrassment as she knelt to clean up the mess, fighting back tears that threatened to spill. Her manager, Janet, emerged from the back office with a disapproving shake of her head. "Sarah, I need to see you in my office after your shift," Janet said coldly. "We need to discuss your performance issues." Sarah's heart sank. She couldn't lose this job. Not when her little sister Maria depended on her, not when every dollar went toward keeping their tiny apartment and putting food on the table. "Please, Janet, it was just an accident." "Save it for later," Janet cut her off, walking away with a dismissive wave. Sarah stood there, holding the dustpan full of broken ceramic, feeling smaller than the crumbs she was sweeping up. The other waitress, Brenda, walked past and whispered, "Maybe you should take Frank's advice. Some people just aren't cut out for this work." As the dinner rush began, Sarah's hands trembled with every order she took. The morning's humiliation had shaken her confidence, and she found herself second-guessing every movement. She thought about Maria, only 12 years old, waiting at home with homework she couldn't help with because Sarah was always working. The bell above the door chimed, and Sarah looked up to see a woman in an expensive suit enter, followed by a small boy, maybe 8 years old. The woman's phone was already pressed to her ear as she slid into a corner booth, gesturing for the child to sit across from her. "I don't care what the board says," the woman spoke sharply into her phone. "The merger happens this week or I walk." The little boy sat quietly, his clothes neat but his eyes hollow with hunger. Sarah approached their table, notepad ready. "What can I get you folks?" Sarah asked, forcing a smile despite her exhaustion. The woman barely looked up. "Coffee. Black. And keep it coming." She pointed at the boy without breaking her phone conversation. "He'll have water." Sarah glanced at the child, who was staring longingly at the pictures of pancakes and burgers on the menu. "And for him to eat?" "I said water," the woman snapped. "He ate at school." But Sarah could see the lie in the boy's disappointed face. She recognized that look. She had worn it many times as a child when her own mother worked 3 jobs and meals were uncertain. As Sarah brought the coffee and water, she overheard the woman's conversation. "Yes, I know the custody hearing is next week. The boy will be fine with whatever the court decides." The pieces clicked together. This wasn't his mother. This was a legal guardian or social worker, treating this child like a burden rather than a human being. Throughout the hour they sat there, the woman made call after call, completely ignoring the boy. Sarah watched him press his small hands against his stomach, trying to quiet the obvious hunger pangs. His eyes followed every plate of food that passed by. Sarah felt her own stomach clench with familiar pain, not from hunger, but from memory. She knew exactly how that little boy felt. She walked to the kitchen, where Frank was aggressively scraping the grill. "Frank, I need a kid's meal. Pancakes, scrambled eggs, bacon." "What table?" Frank grunted without looking up. "Table 7. Frank glanced toward the corner booth. The woman ordered coffee. Kid got water. "Where's the order ticket?" Sarah's heart pounded. "There isn't one." Frank's spatula stopped mid-scrape. "What do you mean there isn't one?" I'm paying for it myself, Sarah said quietly. From my tips. Frank stared at her like she'd lost her mind. Martinez, you can barely afford your own lunch, and you want to buy food for some stranger's kid? Please, Frank. Just this once. Something in Sarah's voice must have reached him because he looked at her for a long moment, then turned back to the grill. This doesn't happen again, he muttered, cracking eggs with more force than necessary. Sarah waited anxiously as Frank prepared the meal, her hands shaking as she counted the crumpled bills in her apron pocket. $23 in tips from her entire shift. This meal would cost $18. When the plate was ready, Sarah approached the table carefully. The woman was still on her phone, completely absorbed in her business deals. Sarah placed the steaming plate in front of the boy, whose eyes widened in shock. I didn't order this, he whispered, looking scared. Sarah knelt down to his eye level. I know you're hungry, she said softly. Every kid deserves a good meal. The boy's eyes filled with tears. But I don't have any money. You don't need money, sweetheart. Just eat. The woman finally looked up from her phone, seeing the plate. Excuse me, we didn't order this. There must be some mistake. No mistake, Sarah said firmly. It's taken care of. By whom? I'm not paying for food I didn't order. It's on the house, Sarah lied, knowing Janet would never approve such a thing. The woman shrugged and returned to her call, clearly not caring either way. But the little boy looked at Sarah with such gratitude that her heart nearly broke. Thank you, he mouthed silently, then began eating with the careful politeness of a child who had learned not to take food for granted. Sarah watched him eat every bite, feeling a warmth in her chest that made the $18 feel like the best money she'd ever spent. The woman and boy left after 2 hours, the child stopping to whisper thank you to Sarah one more time before being hurried out the door. Sarah felt good about her decision, even as she calculated that she now had only $5 for groceries for the week. Her shift was ending when a black limousine pulled up outside the diner. Sarah watched through the window, curious about who would bring such an expensive car to this run-down part of town. A well-dressed elderly man stepped out, followed by a younger man in a suit carrying a briefcase. They walked straight into the diner, looking completely out of place among the torn booth seats and peeling paint. Excuse me, the elderly man approached Sarah with a kind smile. Are you the waitress who served a young boy and a woman in business attire earlier today? Sarah's stomach dropped. Had she done something wrong? Was the woman pressing charges for the meal she'd provided? Yes, sir, Sarah said nervously. Is there a problem? Quite the opposite, the man said, his eyes twinkling. My name is William Hartford. That little boy you fed, that's my grandson, Timothy. Sarah's confusion must have shown on her face because he continued. The woman was a social worker. Timothy has been in foster care while my son and daughter-in-law sorted out some difficulties. I've been searching for him for months. The man in the suit stepped forward. Mr. Hartford hired me to monitor Timothy's welfare during the custody process. I was observing from across the street today when I witnessed your extraordinary kindness. I don't understand, Sarah said. William Hartford's voice grew thick with emotion. That child has been shuffled between homes and offices for 6 months. No one has shown him genuine kindness or care. You fed him when he was hungry, asked for nothing in return, and treated him with dignity when the adult responsible for him couldn't be bothered. He paused, pulling out a handkerchief to wipe his eyes. Timothy told me about the angel waitress who gave him the best meal he'd had in months and made him feel like he mattered. Sarah felt tears streaming down her face. Anyone would have done the same thing. No, my dear. William shook his head. We've been watching Timothy's care for weeks. You're the first person who saw a hungry child instead of a case file number. The businessman opened his briefcase. Mr. Hartford would like to express his gratitude, but first, he has a question for you. Timothy will be coming home with me next week, William Hartford explained. The custody has been resolved, and he'll finally have the stable, loving home he deserves. But here's my dilemma. I need someone to help care for him. Someone who understands what it means to look out for others, even when it costs them everything they have. Sarah wiped her eyes, still not understanding where this was going. I understand you're studying to be a nurse, William continued. My detective found out quite a bit about you, Sarah. You work 16-hour days to support your sister, you've never missed a rent payment despite barely making ends meet, and you've been putting your education on hold to survive. How did you? When someone shows such kindness to my grandson, I make it my business to learn about them, he said gently. Here's what I'd like to propose. Come work for me as Timothy's caretaker and companion. I'll pay for you to complete your nursing program, provide housing for you and your sister, and offer you a salary that will let you focus on your studies instead of survival. Sarah's legs nearly gave out. I can't accept that. It's too much. The job pays $80,000 a year, the businessman said, handing her a contract. Plus full benefits, housing allowance, and tuition coverage for any accredited nursing program you choose. Frank, who had been eavesdropping from the kitchen, dropped a plate. Even Janet emerged from her office, staring in shock. But why? Sarah whispered. All I did was buy a hungry kid some pancakes. William Hartford smiled, his eyes crinkling with warmth. My dear, you gave him far more than food. You gave him dignity. You saw him as worthy of care when no one else did. That's exactly the kind of person I want looking after my grandson. He gestured toward the window where Timothy was visible in the limousine, pressing his face against the glass and waving excitedly at Sarah. He asked for you specifically, William said. He told me, Grandpa, I want the nice lady who made me feel important to come live with us. How could I say no to that? Sarah looked around the dingy diner, at Frank's shocked face, at Janet's open mouth, at the cracked vinyl seats and buzzing fluorescent lights. Then she looked at the contract in her hands and at the little boy in the limousine who was still waving at her. There's just one condition, William added with a twinkle in his eye. Timothy insists that your first job is to teach him how to make pancakes. Apparently, the ones you bought him were better than Christmas morning. Sarah laughed through her tears, finally understanding that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness create the biggest changes in life. When do I start? She asked. 3 months later, Sarah enrolled in the prestigious nursing program at Columbia University. Timothy thrived in his grandfather's care, and every Sunday morning, he and Sarah made pancakes together, remembering the day a simple meal changed both their lives forever. The last thing Sarah did before leaving Mel's diner was leave a $500 tip for Frank with a note, "For all the times you looked the other way when I needed grace. Thank you for helping me feed a hungry child."